Uh, we have an interesting panel awaiting us. I'd like to call the next round of speakers. I'd like to start with Ahu Ozyurt, and as she's going over to the panel, I'd like to say a few words about her biography. Ms. Ozyurt holds a Master of Science degree from Columbia University, Graduate School of Journalism. Between 2007 and 2009, she had been the Washington correspondent for CNN Turkey and Milliyet newspaper. During that period, she wrote a book on the Obama campaign, Obama, A Perfect Storm. From 2003 until now, she works as a CNN Turkey anchor, and since 2011, she works also as a chief writer-editor in CNN Turkey. Ms. Ozyurt has been specializing on international affairs, energy issues, and financial crisis. Within the framework of her job, she won, among other, the Turkish Radio and TV Correspondents Award for the Best Nightly News and CNN World Report Best Business Story Award with her work on Kazakhstan oil reserves. So let's give her a round of applause. Welcome. Our next speaker, also a very experienced journalist, Yusuf Kanli. I'd like him to join the panel, please. Thank you. Yusuf Kanli is a graduate of the English Language and Literature Department of the Faculty of Letters of the Ankara University. He started journalism with the Turkish Daily News in 1978. In 1993, he joined the Anatolia News Agency as a deputy editor for foreign and diplomatic news. He served at the Daily News as assistant editor, columnist, and executive editor before he assumed the responsibility of electronic publishing. He established Turkey's first daily updated English language news website, the TDN Online, in 1996. From July 2004 to November 2006, he was the editor-in-chief and chief columnist of Daily News. In November 2006, the newspaper moved its headquarters to Istanbul, and he stepped down to become Ankara bureau chief and chief columnist. In February 2007, he quit all executive duties and became a contract columnist of the newspaper. He is a former chairman of Diplomacy Correspondents Association of Turkey, an active member of Association of Foreign Policy Council, and member of several associations and foundations mostly established by Turkish Cypriots living in Turkey or abroad. Again, please, let's put our hands together for Mr. Kanli. Thank you for being in this panel. Our final speaker is Isabelle Dumont, second political advisor for the French Embassy in Ankara. Welcome, ma'am. Ms. Dumont holds 2 master's degrees, one in public affairs from the Institute of Political Studies of Paris and one in Slavic Studies from the Sorbonne University in Paris. She entered the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs in June 2003 as a redactor for Serbia, Montenegro, and Kosovo for Continental Europe Balkan Department. After that, she has been working for the Department for Strategic Security and Disarmament Affairs as a redactor for the Balkans, European NATO and EU operations. In 2007, she was appointed as an advisor for the United Nations, Balkans, Caucasus, Central Asia at the cabinet of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Bernard Kouchner. In 2009, she served as the first advisor for Balkans, Cyprus, Haiti, and terrorism for the French permanent representation to the United Nations. Since October 2011, Ms. Dumont is working in Turkey as a second political advisor for the French Embassy in Ankara. Thank you for joining our panel. And last but not least, we have the Honorable Yasar Yakis as our moderator today. Ooh, my apologies. The Polish ambassador we already introduced. His Excellency, if we could also have you join the panel, we'd appreciate it. Thank you all. I'm sure it's going to be a very productive discussion. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. We are running such an interesting, where is Mark? Interesting meeting that we are always behind schedule because of the lively interest of the audience in what is being said and therefore the questions. So for this reason, I would like to ask the panelists today, again as I did this morning, to be as concise as possible at the initial stage. You may have noticed, for those who have been in the previous sessions, that the most interesting part of this panel is the question and answer period, because it shows on which specific subjects the audience focuses its attention, rather than listening to the lectures, because of course the panelists have very interesting things to say, but if we want to keep the audience as the beneficiary, receiving part, we may perhaps turn to them and to choose the subject they are interested in. For this reason, I would like to begin with Yusuf, who is a very experienced journalist, as you listened a few moments ago when we were listening to his CV. And I will ask him to begin with some provocative thoughts or thought-provoking ideas, and leave it there. Then we move to other panelists and ask them to do the same thing. Mr. Kanli, you have said.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I think I would like to give this to Mark. This is my speech, which I will not deliver. But you may distribute to our friends. Because otherwise it will go out of time again. Interdependence is the key word that I will focus in this presentation today. Interdependence as opposed to independence. You know, in the 19th century or in the 18th century, the word was independence. And the dictum was to have independent countries. Whereas our century is no longer the century of independent states. Rather, it's a century of interdependent states. This is rather different compared to past. Why interdependent states? I would give you an example from my own childhood. When I was 5, 10, 15, I was willing to die for the Turkish Cypriot cause for freedom. I was a mujahid. At the age of 16, I was worrying. Thank God I never killed anyone, but I had arms in my hand. I was willing to die for a cause, like many other people who has nothing to lose. If you don't have anything to lose, you are willing to die for something. But at my age, now, which I may be considered little older than young, but definitely younger than old.
Upper part of the young.
I am not ready to die for anything, whatever it might be. Because everything is very precious for me now. I have many things to lose. I studied through my political career because of coincidence, because of the requirement of the job in many areas. Primarily the Cyprus problem, of course, as a Cypriot. But I covered, for example, the Armenian-Azeri war as well on the war front. When I was with the NATO News Agency, I visited Nagorno-Karabakh when it was Azeri territory, when it was under occupation, from both the Azeri side and from the Armenian side. Interesting enough, despite the war, despite all that happened, despite occupation, there is effective cooperation between Armenia and Azerbaijan even today on one issue: how to battle the rats of Nagorno-Karabakh. That in 2002, when I visited Nagorno-Karabakh as the chairman of diplomatic correspondence at the time, which was a taboo, to mind you, for a Turk, particularly working for Anatolia News Agency or having relations with the state, going and visiting Nagorno-Karabakh was a big event.
Sin.
It was a sin. And I stayed there overnight. And I learned with surprise that they have a very nice working relationship, because rats are bigger enemy than either. Thus, I will not take much more time. I made my point. Interdependence is the name of the game today. Whether it is a nation state trying to go through turmoils of a spring blown up somewhere, or a central European state moving from communism to free market economy, alone you do nothing. Alone is adventurism. It's not independence as we used to consider 50 years ago. Now, the name of the game is interdependence. Establishing networks. Networks of oil, networks of gas, networks of electricity, networks of water pipelines, networks of mutual interests. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, you made your point so clear in such a short presentation that if it were longer, we wouldn't have captured that much from your wisdom. And this comparison of interdependence and independence, and also the determination of the people who have nothing to lose, that they sacrifice their life. So you made your point very well. Now I would like to change the format of the panel a little bit because His Excellency the Ambassador of Poland is with us for a very short while. I would like to give him the floor to ask him whether he has anything to add to valuable views that he shared with us a few moments ago, and ask the audience to ask questions to these panelists, and then we, after His Excellency the Ambassador of Poland leaves us, we continue the panel with the others if the other panelists agree. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
I would like to add just a few words. I remember to be brief. It pays off. To add a few thoughts to what Yusuf Kanli just said. I think that the whole European integration idea, the EU idea, is just about that. I think Europe went in 20th century through two major conflicts that devastated the continent and resulted in a horrible killings of its citizens, and the response to these tragedies and to these horrors were simply interdependence and cooperation on various levels and exchange of sovereignty in some areas and just to prevent this horror to happen again. And I think as we can see that this has been successful and that the European Union, albeit built on a very painful experience, I mean the result of it is successful and still is an attractive pole for instance for other countries, namely in the Balkans or Turkey. So that was something I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now I turn to the audience, and if you have questions or comments to be made after the intervention or expose of the two panelists, I invite them to take the floor. Mark, you should encourage people to...
Oh, there we go. You're doing a good job. Okay, please.
Just a short comment to what you told us about the RED cooperation in Nagorno-Karabakh. You have a beautiful example in Nicosia, where there's a cooperation between the Turkish and the Greek Cypriot side under the ground with the common sewage system. So that relates to the RED somehow. Thank you.
To mind you, the cooperation regarding Nicosia, two sides of Nicosia regarding sewage systems and drinking water systems as well, never stopped despite all the troubles the island lived. Never stopped and is still continuing today perfectly. Now we have problems regarding water lately and electricity. Up until a few years ago, they were as well sharing electricity without any hindrance in the city. Now we have problems in that area resulting from cementing separation.
And it will be calcified, then it will not be able, we will not be able to undo it any longer, because in the south, when there was a power cut because of the explosion, the Turkish Cypriots offered to sell electricity, but there was a big reaction not to buy even electricity from Turks. They preferred rather living with the gasoline lamps, rather than taking electricity from Turkey. This also shows the evolution of the idea of living together, because when you live separate for a long time, then you lose the interest in recapturing what was possible in the past. Yes, are there other questions? This shows that the panelists were very concise in their explanation, in their remarks and observations, so it did not leave any room for further questions. I thank His Excellency the Ambassador, and I now continue with perhaps who is in order here. Is it you?
Isabelle can go ahead. I think Isabelle can go ahead. That's fine.
Yes, okay. You may have the floor in this case. We may listen to you, and then to turn to our Turkish colleague.
Merci beaucoup. I just want to start with the title, which is Regional Cooperation as a Factor Leading to Sustained Peace. I think the word sustained peace is really essential, and I'm going to go through two examples that I had to deal with, which was the war in Georgia in 2008 and Peacebuilding. I will talk less about that in New York, the Peacebuilding Commission. What is essential, and that we diplomats don't always have in mind, is to build a sustained peace. And this is sort of self-criticism, if you'd like. But on the other hand, should we criticize that? Is there anything else that we can do? If you take conflict resolution, beginning pre-conflict periods, conflict and post-conflict phases, you cannot act the same way, but still you have the same sort of characteristics that you can use. I will start with Georgia very shortly. I found, thinking over about what happened then in 2008, I found 4 characteristics of the way we handled it with the international community, and specifically the French presidency of the European Union. The first one was the sense of urgency. There was an army, the Russian army, on the ground. It was just going through the country, and we had to act very quickly. And if you think of what's happening now, for example, in Libya last year, it's pretty similar. The second characteristic was reactivity of the international community, and should be. The war started during the night of 7th from 8th of August, Thursday to Friday. On the Sunday, two days later, Bernard Kouchner, the French minister, was underground in Tbilisi. The next day, the same evening, we had already, prepared a peace plan. And President Sarkozy came over to Moscow and then to Tbilisi the next day, the Tuesday. So the whole thing, the whole peace process was actually dealt within 5 days. And I think this was really essential to the result, to stopping the war, and this was the only aim then. And again, we can think of Libya. Remember the resolution, also on a Thursday last year. I think it's impossible to rewrite history, but I do think that there was an effect of surprise of our presence on the ground, and that really played, and history may have gone another direction if we hadn't reacted so quickly. The third characteristic was the presence on the ground. This presence is first political, as I said. The president, the French president, the French foreign minister went to Georgia, to Russia. Kushner went 4 times in 2 months to Georgia. To check on the deployment on the ground. The presence is also operational. There was a mission, an observer mission of the European Union deployed in just 1 month, 300 people. The EU has never ever sent such a mission so quickly. That was a big achievement also for the EU. The fourth and last characteristic, as I see of this conflict of this example, was, and it's back to the title, the implication of the regional actors. As I said, the EU was involved very quickly. Actually, on the 13th of August, so just 4 or 5 days after the start of this conflict, the peace plan, the 6-point peace plan, was brought to Brussels after 2-3 nights without any sleep, and the 27 ministers were in Brussels. We had called them on Tuesday to bring this meeting in Brussels. The very next day, just some hours, not even 24 hours later, all the ministers except 1 or 2 were in Brussels, the EU ministers, to agree on the peace plan. And this was really essential. There was also the OSCE, which played a very essential role during the whole phase, with the Finnish presidency, chairmanship of the OSCE. All together, EU and OSCE working hand in hand. And again, I think this was really the core of the way that we dealt with this conflict, and the reason why we could stop the conflict and then bring peace and then work on it in the coming months and years. On the implication of regional actors, you have, again, going back to Libya, you can see the importance of regional actors now, I think, more and more in the international game. If you think of the resolutions 1970 and 1973 last year, I think they couldn't have, I was in New York then, I think they couldn't have been agreed without the Arab League role, without Arab League being on the side with the Security Council, and the same thing happened with Resolution 1975 on Côte d'Ivoire, and the CEDEAO, and then African Union role. So this is just to say that we had the Cold War, then we had, the beginning of 1990s with a sort of new international organization role on peace building, and I think now the regional organizations cannot be forgotten in anything we do. I could say some words on peace building, but maybe I can keep that for later if there are any questions.
Questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You are so skillful in moderating the television programs, but now you are contributing as a panelist. So, what will be your contribution to the subject of this meeting?
Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much. It's always a great pleasure and honor to be with you on the same panel. I'll just touch on the media and technology side of where this whole big picture is going. I don't see anyone that young anymore, but we used to have pen friends. I mean, we would literally write letters to each other in the 80s when we were starting high school and practicing English. I had pen friends from Sweden and Norway, for example. And it was so... for me, it was so encouraging to have them come and have a vacation in Turkey. Now it seems like a nostalgic idea because you can reach your friends online in an instant and send messages and share information with them. But at the same time, does it have the same sincerity? Does it bring the same notion of sharing each other's experiences? The speed is enormous, but at the same time, there's a huge, massive flow of information that is going unnoticed.
Pollution of it also.
Exactly. And with that, I will challenge Yusuf about his terminology. We're probably going through states becoming more and more productive and returning to their independent souls after this whole financial crisis. But at the same time, citizens becoming more and more interconnected and intercommunicative. Those two forces will at some point challenge each other. The Arab Spring was just the sort of beginning of it, and we haven't seen, just like the ambassador would say, we don't know what it's going to turn out into 100 years from now, but it showed us how citizen power can be used in cooperation and at the same time mobilization in politics and in possibly maybe even peace building. I will give you one example from my experience in the earthquake in Van recently when we were in the field after a couple of hours after the massive earthquake in October. There were times when your satellite trucks don't work or your cell phones may not have the same good voice conditions. But if all of a sudden became a network of people around Van, all reporters, sharing each other the basic information about the situation on the ground. So the picture becomes much clearer, much sooner, and the needs and the emergency situation becomes very important for the authorities. Until that day, the government officials who were making a mockery about Twitter started using it as their basic information source. And I have to admit, there were times when we were not able to say certain things on television, but we were luckily free to write it on the Twitter. So look at the censorship, the control, and the freedom of expression point of view. This is going to be one of the challenges of how intercultural diplomacy can work in the future. There are a couple of stories, questions out there that we should probably address in the next couple of years. How will morality and religion play out in the cyberspace? How much are we going to, among religions and belief groups, are we going to listen and understand each other and not patronize each other? Will Islam avoid a sectarian war, which becomes more and more of a talking point in the Western circles as well? Because at some point, from their point of view, it's easy to say that Renaissance and reform had to happen after a big, long sectarian war in Europe. And if Shiites and Sunnis have to reconcile and there has to be a new awakening in the Islam world, it has to come after a big war. Hopefully it's not true. It's a bad theory and it will never happen, hopefully. But these are a couple of the talking question marks that I'd like to leave you with, and maybe a nice, shining light at the end of the tunnel with Turkey and EU. 10 years ago, EU and Turkey was a sort of a long-awaited marriage. Everyone wants to become a European member. There were skeptics like the fishermen or the white goods producers who said we couldn't keep up with the EU standards. But now it comes to a point where even the most Eurosceptics on the nationalist side, on the most secularist side, think that the European Court of Justice, at the end of the day, whatever may happen in the court in Istanbul or the court in Ankara, there is a place that you can go at the end of the day, even after 35 years. You can go to a court and seek justice for the son who has been killed in the mountain or the one who's been tortured in a jail, what have you. That hope keeps the initiative alive in Turkey. And I hope and I believe that it will keep the hope even better in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that now we will have more intervention and perhaps comments and also questions to ask. You see, as I guessed,
I see a number of
there are
hands already.
already
Who is
2 or
first?
3, yes.
You have a better vantage point. So.
Yeah.
All right, we'll start here and then we'll come to the side.
Nurshek, Horn of Africa analyst. Very good, thought-provoking presentations. Madam, I will start with you. You kept on referring to the example of Libya. The African Union took an opposite position from you. You know, they didn't prefer a military solution to the Libya crisis, and both the U.S. and France did not, and the UK did not take into consideration the opinion of the thinking of the African Union. So when do you choose to listen to regional organizations and when not to? Thank you.
So what is the criteria for using it or not using?
Should I take a few questions or go back to the panel?
I think this was directed
Good.
to Isabelle, so if you wish to comment.
First of all, to be clear, I'm not a specialist of the question, but what you say, I mean, what is clear is that when you have a conflict, and especially some conflict like Libya, and we remember what happened last year. What happened was that very concretely we had there was an operation going on, and we had to stop it. This goes back to other issues like ingérence, devoir d'ingérence, comme on dit ça en anglais. Le devoir d'ingérence.
Right, the duty to intervene.
Duty to intervene. Thank
Yes.
you. Merci beaucoup. The duty to intervene, and so I mean you have to take into. I understand your point that you know what is the criteria, but again the resolution was adopted after you know a great agreement with the Arab League, and I think this was really an achievement of the Security Council that actually had to you know to cope with different views, and finally the Security Council was able to agree on the resolutions.
More as an African than an Arab member of the Arab League.
I think Yusuf has also a comment to offer. Then perhaps if you are satisfied, then we will move to the other question.
Of course, the Libya intervention, unfortunately, was not, let's say, an intervention consolidating the responsibility to protect, but rather an operation that killed, effectively, the responsibility to protect principle. Because, one, as you rightly said, regional actors were not totally involved in the whole decision-making process. Two, cards were not honestly put on the table. Some key factors or key members of the Security Council were cheated, and the operation was taken. Three, diplomacy was not given a chance before the responsibility to protect was implemented. And four, which is, I think, more important than others, the scope of responsibility to protect includes intervention. I mean, no one can deny it, but that is the last resort. The primary concept should be to provide space for humanitarian assistance, not to go and remove the dictator you are against and install a new dictator you would like to have it. Therefore, I mean, that was wrong.
I'll just add one quick comment. I was there about a year before he was toppled. And Trablus was almost like Rio or Havana. The beach was beautiful. The buildings were rising up. Everywhere you had his pictures with the African map on it. So he literally placed himself as the leader of African Union. But at the same time, we saw this television and media playing a very difficult and very manipulative role in these Arab Springs. And we will bring that into more if you ask more about it. There's still an unanswered question about how much Al Jazeera literally helped these leaders toppled. Was the crisis, was the uprisings real, or were we really misled into a visual war?
Thank you very much. If dissatisfied, I would like to move to the second question.
I'm Alp Özer'den from Coventry University. When the topic is regional cooperation, I can't help but asking the question about the regional hegemons and regional hegemon wannabes. Because when you are dealing with a conflict, I think one of the issues is that the conflict between regional hegemon wannabes. Considering that we are, in Turkey, I'd like to get the comments from the panel in terms of Turkey's role as a regional hegemon in relation to other regional hegemon candidates, and particularly the role of the media in the creation of the
potential candidates.
And the role of media in the creation of these regional hegemons, in the way they portray certain conflicts, in the way they portray the role of, say, in Turkey, in the regional conflicts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who would like to comment?
Okay.
Yusuf,
I like to handle hot potatoes.
did you put on the television?
It's on. First of all, I do consider the role of media as one not supportive of governments, but rather critical of governments by nature. Therefore, all through my life, I have always been in opposition. I mean, and I don't see any problem in that as long as I'm outside of prison. So far, I manage. I don't know what will happen next. Turkey is, of course, a country in transition. Whether it's a regional hegemon or a global player, yes, it is a big country. It is bigger than nation state, smaller than an empire, I should say. Therefore, it has a weight in the area. It's the former ruler of the many parts of its geography. It has cultural links, it has ethnic links, it has historical links. Turkey is not a Libya or even a Syria. Turkey is one of the major players of this geography, and in that regard, one of the major players of international politics in this geography. Is Turkey reviving neo-Ottomanism, therefore? I do have problems in saying no. But thank God, so far, Turkish neo-Ottomanism remained cultural, except latest, let's say, outpours of emotionalism at the prime minister level, at the foreign minister level, regarding Syria, regarding Libya. And I should say, I mean, the Turkish foreign policy regarding Libya initially was perfect. Later, busted. We became guardians of NATO. We didn't play much role, but I mean, we were there. It was like our, Turkey joining the Second World War at the last minute, just to save the image. With Syria, apparently we thought we were late in Libya, therefore we must rush in Syria, and we became the leading element of offensive on Bashar al-Assad, which of course was evolved in Turkish language and created out of him a new Assad, a new enemy. Of course, this geography is very sensitive. When you play with one, you play with many. You have the religion factor, you have the ethnic factor, you have historical boundaries, you have historical limitations, you have connotations that you would otherwise don't consider anyhow, but they are there. What if tomorrow, while trying to preserve your iron fist or steadfast position, if you trigger a regional war for the sake of saving, in quotes, the opposition in Syria? These are all problematic things. And as my friend said, we are not clear what is real news, what is input by some elements that claim to be honest, but we have no authentication. Who are they? They are just pouring in information, and we tend to believe, because we are getting the same news from so many sources. But are they authentic? What is news?
Can you verify?
We cannot verify them. The other hegemonic elements of the region is, of course, apart from Iran, there is none. And with Iran, we decided some 400 years ago that we cannot beat each other. We made a peace. We signed a border agreement. And for almost 400 years, we remained loyal to our treaty. With minor, small changes, we kept the border intact, and the policy of non-interfering in internal affairs of each other, so far. Now, our Prime Minister is saying they are not trustworthy people. Yesterday, they were brother, like Assad. Is Iran in the pipeline? I hope not. Now, these are, all not something tangible in our hands, but there are lots of information contamination. Where we are, we'll see all together.
I'll just say something, if you allow me, on behalf of the media. I don't see a regional hegemony in the making, but Turkey has to make a choice. From my point of view, I think that policymakers want to place Turkey more like a power, like India, like China. China is way out of our league now, but China maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Our policymakers, our government wants to have equal footing like them. Now that's a different choice. Would you rather have a democracy like Spain and live with European standards? Or would you like to have a growth rate like China and India and live with that kind of wealth standards? That's a big dichotomy, and it is going to go on for a while. And from that on, we will decide of the identity and whether there will be a hegemony or maybe an appeal to the Arab street. That they're watching it very closely as well, and they're not really fascinated by everything that's happening in Turkey. They're watching very closely, and intellectuals in the Arab circles are very excited about how Turkey is changing as well.
Thank you, Ahu. Not only you ask very pertinent questions in your programs, but you are also making very pertinent comments. Isabelle, do you have any comment to offer on this question? Then we move to other questions, please.
Okay, we'll go here.
Ali Dirios from the Bilkent University, Department of International Relations, and my question is directly to Madame Isabelle Dumont regarding your account of the Russia-Georgia conflict in 2008. Please correct me if I'm mistaken, but as far as I remember, now, you've given a nice account how much there was a proactive diplomacy on the side of the French foreign minister and in halting, let's say, that or freezing that conflict. But as far as I can remember, there was the issue of the conflict being prolonged due to a bad translation between French and Russian in August 2008. Now, since we're at the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy, which very much stresses on dialogue as a way to remove misunderstandings, was that particularly a real misunderstanding that can happen due to differences of culture, or as the Telegraph put it, because of bad French used in the translation? Or was it really just an excuse on behalf of the Russians to not pull out, and then when only other regional and international actors such as maybe the United States of America or maybe even Turkey also put pressure on Russia that the Russians finally decided to withdraw from Georgia? I would like to very much have your opinion on that. Thank you.
Isabelle, you are the best placed person to answer this question, actually. We couldn't find any better interlocutor than Isabelle to comment on this, please.
Actually, it's not so clear anymore in my memory. No, really. It's actually interesting when you leave those things that then it just gets all mixed up, and I didn't then write. You know, it's not even hour by. I mean, it's not even day by day. It's like minute by minute. I should have written. There was something I cannot. I'm now looking at this at the 6 point. I think you're referring to a misunderstanding on the 6-point agreement. So first of all, there was no problem of translation. I mean, of any oral translation or something. There was, but I cannot, and I'm not going to, lose time now looking at the. I should look at the Russian version, which I don't have. But there was indeed a word that was different. If you remember, you could help me. But
yeah. Could you give the microphone again to?
As far, I mean, this is we're just talking with my colleague here. This is at least how it was portrayed in the media, and we, of course, were only able to follow it through the media. But I think it was specifically regarding the whether to what extent Russia should pull out from Georgia. Was it because the French understanding? I mean. And I'm reading from the Telegraph, which is a British newspaper, so it may not be very pro-French in that regard, but the Telegraph portrayed it as if the Russians did not understand that they had to pull out from entire Georgia, because the word was about the zones that the agreement, in the 6-point agreement, and please correct me if I'm mistaken, the Russians were going to pull off, but they were going to stay in southern Ossetia and in some of the other territories in dispute. This is what I can remember, and this is how I've recently read from the Telegraph.
Retrait ou évacuation, je crois, la différence.
Oui, il y avait ça, puis il y avait aussi en dehors ou. Anyways, from what you can see, from my reaction, which is like, I don't remember very well, you can guess my answer, which is whatever is, I mean, there is something, like I remember there is something, but honestly, as someone who was there, the whole time and dealt with that day by day, I can tell you that this was not at all. I remember that the media, as always, made something out of it, but it was not. It was not part of the problem. And I mean, like weeks later, when we came back to the floor, to the ground, to see where the Russian soldiers had they gone back or not, and even now. Russia has never actually, in our discussions, in the bilateral discussions, in the international forum, they have never said, look at the agreement, we have the right to be there. So we always told them, you should go out of Perevi, you should go out of Akhalgori, you should go out of this, that. For this, there was, for example, this village on the west part of South Ossetia, Perevi, and it was clear that they shouldn't be there. And we told them, you have to go out, and they finally went out of the village. They never claimed that because of the 6-point agreement they could stay. So I see your point, but to answer very clearly your question, no, it was not part of it. It was in the media, but it was not a real translation problem. The problem was not the translation. The problem was that the Russian army stayed.
Thank you very much. We have come to the end of our discussion. Shall we prolong, or because it is time now for us to stop? If there are other questions, we may take one more.
Maybe
one or two more.
final questions,
three
final questions, and maybe I would
Okay.
suggest we group them together, and then
Okay.
maybe a final response from the
One
panel.
after the other.
Okay. Right.
My question, again, to Ms. Isabelle Dumont. It's about the sustained peace.
You did not introduce yourself.
Ishak Bilalu from Civitas Foundation, Albania. Regarding the sustained peace, and I really think that what the European shuttle diplomacy had worked in the conflict, in particular in the Balkans, has been very invaluable, and the shifting of the more of a proactive diplomacy has already played its role. But my question is regarding the conflict in Balkans, in particular Kosovo, knowing that Bernard Kouchner and the French government had played a very remarkable role. Though my question is whether the EU is late in providing or being very slow in providing sustained peace, knowing that the countries in the Balkans have shown interest on interdependency, and working on a regional cooperation, but certain governments are not proactive in that role. So is EU with negotiations, current negotiations in Kosovo and Serbia, are being late in providing this peace for which probably Mitrovica North and the issue of the minorities is kind of a pending. So is European Union too late in this, or it's still there's time basically to resolve this problem?
Thank you. Now we will put together the three questions.
Thank you. My name is Michelle Casdano. I'm working with the United Nations in Germany, but I'm originally from Lebanon. I've lived most of my life in Lebanon. My question hinges more on the media side, so my question would be to the media experts. I actually, I want to talk about this interdependency, but maybe on a more, it's on a regional level, but taking each country by itself, per se. So, yeah, this interdependency, my question to you is there any risk that it might at some point turn into a form of stagnation, or if it might create some form of dependency? And the reason why I'm saying this is because I agree with you about what you've been saying about social media, but I think it's always good to look also at the counter effect of social media. We all agree on how positive for all it has been playing in the Arab Spring, but yeah, what I'm wondering about is I've read a few studies about how the Syrian regime, for example, the Assad regime, has been suppressing its people more and more in a strategic way by actually not blacking out the social media. So when people are able to communicate through Facebook or through Twitter, then they wouldn't really feel this urge to take to the streets and to go out and see what's really going on out there. I mean, we have seen a huge amount of people who did take to the street and who did demonstrate, but still we don't know how it would have been had it been not the case, or maybe, yeah, had it been for this Facebook phenomenon. And it also reminds me of something, yeah, a bit more national, because also I saw for example, in Lebanon, if I compare 2005, 2006, and yeah, 2011, 2012, right now actually, I also saw that back in 2006, 2007, this whole social media thing wasn't just as grand as it is today, and people did take to the streets in huge numbers, and I also went there as well, and I didn't see on Facebook that other people were also joining, but I felt, yeah, so much for this cause, so I felt that I had to take part. But now, what has happened to me and what has happened to so many others as well is that we go on Facebook, these Facebook pages, for example, and we see these causes, and then we see, wow, so 1,000 people are actually joining, or 10,000, or even more. I don't have to join, you know? So this creates this kind of stagnation that I'm talking about. And I just want to see whether you agree to that, or if there really is a counter effect also to social media.
Everything has counter effects. Yes, please. The next to you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm just a freelance writer. My name is Hejan. I would like to address this question to Madame Isabelle Dumont. I would like to know how, within the context of cultural diplomacy, within this framework, I would like to address this question. How will, you know, French politicians, as we see the first round of elections on the 22nd, we are just looking forward to it, you know, how will French politicians repair the damage of the Turkish image in that country? Because, you know, by an research by TEPAU, I have just read that there were, I think, 400,000 Armenians in France, and they are very well integrated into French society and very well represented in political circles, you know, intellectual circles, social circles. They live in Lyon, Paris, Rhone Valley, Marseille. So, but the Turkish people in France, they have an invisible community as opposed to Germany, you know. How, is there any government implementation to take effect in the next decade between France and Turkey? We look forward to this positive image formation within the context of cultural diplomacy. Thank you so much.
This is why Isabelle is in Turkey, actually, to do exactly this. Yes, now who would like to start? From the...
I'll toss a nice ball to Isabelle, but I'll just come back later on. I think the best cultural diplomacy, and I've been joking about this over lunch today, that you can blockade, put embargo on every French product, but ask every Turkish woman, and they know the name Pierre Ducan. So invite him, and you are a star in Turkey. I'll comment on my side.
Okay, fine. Isabelle, with this now, it's a good introduction to the French labeling.
So I will, I guess, start with the second question. I'm not sure I understood the question, because you talked about the damage of the Turkish image in France. That's my understanding, or the lack of Turkish presence in France. I would say ask the Turkish community. I mean, you seemed very critical of the fact that the Armenian community is you know, plays a role in the Turkish society. Yeah, no.
Speaking, just read and would like to comment. Your comment.
Okay. I think, you know, it really, in any country, I mean, this is not only for France, in any country, how can you explain why and how the different communities integrate or play a role in the society, or don't play a role? I think actually, I mean, I know that there is a ministry, a Turkish ministry, in charge of the diaspora, and I guess that this is a work that this ministry is doing to see how the Turkish communities abroad in France, but in many other countries, can integrate better and play a better role. The only point that I want to say as a sort of answer to your question, to your point, is that the Turkish image has got actually quite better in France. I mean, it's
improved. Yes.
It has really improved. There was also, and going back to cultural diplomacy, there was a Turkish season 2-3 years ago.
Yes.
In 2010, 2 years ago, there was a huge Turkish season in cultural season in France. So that was a way also, and that was a decision by the French government to invite to France Turkish artists and to have those exchanges, cultural exchanges, and this really helped to improve the image of Turkey in France. On the Mitrovica point, Merdita. This is the only Albanian word that I know. I totally disagree with what you said. We have to fight after. No, I mean, I totally disagree with the very start of your question and then with the whole thing. When you say, why is the EU late in providing sustained peace? Why should the EU provide anything? I mean, the EU has helped to provide, and I think this is really a danger, I mean, a bad way, if I may. I mean, I'm sort of, but you shouldn't, I mean, when you talk about peace building, not only stopping war, when you stop a war, like I said on Georgia, then you can, go there and just stop the war, and, sometimes you cannot really think of the future, you don't have time. But when we talk about peace building, which is, I think, your question, providing peace, this has to be done by the actors on the ground. The EU cannot provide peace without the actors. And actually I totally, defend the EU, but also because I really think we do the best we can. We have the dialogue that the EU is helping with as a mediator. I don't think the EU can do anything else than mediating. You have to have the Albanians, the Serbs, Kosovars, talk together. If you put an international actor, whatever it is, to impose a peace, to impose a settlement, you can be sure that 10 years later you will be back to problems. You have to have the actors agree on something. So this is how we would answer your question.
Thank you very much. I will come to you.
Okay.
Yeah. And on Hejan's question, I think the comparison of the Turkish community in France and Armenian community needs further elaboration. First of all of the Armenians in France are French citizens, whereas Turks are not citizens, so they cannot vote. One thing. Secondly, they are more prosperous and they are more educated, and all these things also have to be taken into consideration. Now, I think all the other questions, language barrier, of course, and now there were several questions addressed to the press and media in general. So
I'll just make one, and
you
maybe
have the floor.
Yusuf may want to comment too. You are absolutely right about crowdsourcing, outcrowding, and killing the whole movement on the internet, which happens a lot. But we saw two good examples. Cedar Revolution in Lebanon was a big excitement for the entire, and that's probably where the Arab Spring started in the first place. When Iranians took it to the streets on the Green Revolution and they're badly crushed, it showed a very big sign to the opposition all across the region that they should be very careful and at the same time very mobile and flexible. We watched them on Twitter. I watched them when I was in the States at that time, how they were tweeting about which street to run away when they need to run away from the Revolutionary Guard. They made it so open, so transparent, it was almost like watching a movie. Now, after that bad crush, the opposing parties and the opposition groups organized themselves in such a way that they could use the internet, just like in Tahrir, when they are ready to go out to the street and take people out to the street, mobilize them like Obama did in his election campaign. But you are absolutely right. When there's too much crowd out there, or there seems to be too much crowd out there, there may be actually nothing going on. And so it is basically how many people how many foot you can put on the ground that counts in terms of a social change. Facebook and Twitter are just mechanisms doing this, and they are not working equally well in every place. It's up to the country's tradition, most likely. Lebanon is an open society, multicultural society. You can go out and protest. Egypt, relatively NGOs, unions, academics that can take it to the streets. But in Syria, 30 years of dictatorship. A couple of weeks ago, one of the opposition leaders came to Istanbul and said, we don't know how to unite because this has never happened in our history. We don't know how democracy works. Help us debate and then unite. We don't have a time for this, but democracy is completely new to us, and allow us to debate among each other. That's going to play out for a while. But you're right about how social media can be sometimes a.
Actually, no, you will have the last word. Actually, when I was serving in Syria, something like 32 years ago, the question of normalization of relations between Syria and Israel has always been on the agenda. And somewhere in one European country, one Syrian and one Israeli became friends, and they talked to each other. And the Syrian asked, "What do you mean by normalization of relations?" And the Israeli said that, well, to be able to visit Syria freely and go to the coffees and say loudly whatever you want, etc., He said, we Syrians cannot do it in our country. How can you expect the the Israelis to do so? So this was very much in line with what you described as Syria is. Yusuf, now you have the last word because we are 15 minutes late in our schedule.
I'll make just two small comments. One, I was in Baku in '93. I was trying to cover the Armenia-Azerbaijan war. It was very, very tiring, very dangerous. And after struggling for about 40 days to interview Haydar Aliyev, late Haydar Aliyev, I managed to meet him at about 3:30 a.m. one day. And I went to my hotel together with the TRT's reporter. Of course, we transcribed our interview. And while transcribing, of course, we were speaking loud. And we reported to our agency and to TRT 7 o'clock or so in the morning, again on the telephone, shouting, and went to bed. 2 or 3 hours later, I woke up with someone reporting an interview with Haydar Aliyev. It was incredible. I mean, I worked on it for 3 weeks, and someone was reporting on it. The guy was saying, why are you so, Haydar Aliyev said, why are you so supportive of Abul Fazl Elçibey? I am as pro-Atatürk as Elçibey. And so, I immediately dashed to the room of the TRT's reporter and said, it appears that some other people interviewed Haydar Aliyev as well. He said, they cannot, it's impossible. I mean, we struggled so much, I mean, and you are from the state agency, I am from the state TV, and we managed to get it after 3 weeks. How can they get it? And we met at the lunch, immediately, of course. I went to the guy who was reporting. I said, when you made the interview? He said, I didn't. I said, but I heard you reporting an interview. He said, if he dares, he may say, I didn't say it. I said, I quoted him saying, I loved Atatürk as well. You know, this is not...
They stole your story.
They stole my story, of course. It was in Sabah, a paper that you worked as well at the time. And I was mad about it.
But it is not Ahu's mistake.
No, no, no. She was, at the time, she was not working with it. Perhaps you were not started, you were not in journalism yet, in '93.
Well, yeah.
Anyhow, you know, this happens in the media as well, over-reporting. Someone reporting from Damascus, a woman crying for help, might be a macho who has never been to Damascus and writing in London. We have seen this. Therefore, please be careful. These Twitter things, Facebook things are not verified. You cannot rely on them. It's impossible to rely on them. Yeah, you have that version. It may be used to obstruct a massive demonstration, but it might be used to gather people around an idea as if that is happening as well. This is very dangerous. Two-way.
Ignorance is power. This is what George Orwell said in 1930. So we should keep the ignorance to be in power. Thank you very much for this very lively discussion. And this ends our panel. And thank you for the panelists.